There we go. I see REC.
All right, well, good morning. Glad to see everybody here so bright and early and shiny and everything. Some of you are in cohort 1. How many people here are in cohort 1 for the LDC? And how many people are cohort 2? So we're kind of split. There's about 40 in total within the district, 40 to 50 people in the district that were LDC cohort 1 and 2. So those people that are not here are going to get to watch this video and kind of be where we didn't want to be, behind that 8 ball with planning and everything. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get everybody caught up and they'll be able to watch it and you'll be able to go back and check on it and see if there's anything that you missed or what have you for what we're doing. My name is Carrie Ann Myers. For those of you that don't know me, this is going to be my 11th year in Marshall County. My 5th year as an assistant principal. I transferred from Florida 11 years ago and kind of hit culture shock when I came to Grant Mountain. I just got back from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was informed that we live on a hill, not on a mountain here, because we are only 1375 above sea level, and the hills in Salt Lake and in California are like 3,000 to 9,000, you know. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe we do live on a hill. So anyway, I apologize if I digress or if I lose my train of thought. I've been in Salt Lake scoring AP seminar research papers for the past 14 days, doing all the pre-work and everything before that 7-day task. So finished Saturday, got home yesterday about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and a little tired, time zone and all that kind of good stuff, jet lag and all that fun stuff. So anyway, we'll go ahead and we're going to walk around and introduce, not walk around, sorry. We're going to go around the room and introduce ourselves. Pam is my partner here today, and so that's who I am, and we're here to do some LDC stuff.
I'm Pam Gillen, and I'm at the high school, Douglas High School, and I'm the literacy coach there, and last year was our first year with LDC.
I'm Vicki Martin. I teach at Brindley Mountain High School. I'm 6th grade ELA.
Hey, I'm Melissa Godwin. I teach math and science at Brindley Mountain High School.
Jeff Sharpton, Brindley Mountain High School, and I teach chemistry.
Alicia Gorham, Brindley Mountain High School Special Ed.
I'm Erica Griffith. I've transferred. This is my first year at Brindley Mountain High School. I'm doing 7th and 8th grade language arts.
Go Lions.
And where did you transfer from, Douglas?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good.
Jay Gibson, Asbury, Aggerson.
Amber Hancock, Social Studies, Spanish, Asbury High School.
Ellen Partrick, ELA, History at Asbury High School, 6th grade.
Patrick Hammett, History and Science, DAR Middle.
Tim Stewart, World History, 9th grade, Douglas High School.
June Healy, 6th grade Science, Douglas.
April Daniel, 7th grade History at Douglas Middle.
Sherry Brown, 9th grade, English and Spanish, DAR High School.
Ashley Weems, science, occasionally a little bit of history, DAR High School.
Glenda Baker, DAR High School, History, 10th and 11th, 19th year. Laura Sutton, World History, 9th graders.
Well, welcome everybody. A couple of things before we start diving into some of this stuff. There's some snacks up here that you're welcome to. We have a soda machine where the women's restroom is. If you go down, second door on the right, the restroom and the soda machine are in there if you need to get anything or go to the restroom. Men's restroom is there. Then we got the student restrooms right around the corner. So if you guys got to get up and go, move around, absolutely, positively do that. We're trying to be a little bit informal. It's going to probably seem like information overload. We're trying not to do that today because we were having some tech issues with the new security firewall, and I didn't realize it was just Macs that were having that issue. I'm going to share with you the big file, and it's really going to seem like information overload. That's why I started off with some photocopies so that you would be able to have these things at your disposal. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, as far as being able to share that information. If you look at the handout that goes over what the slide presentation is, first thing we're going to talk about is the background of SREB. Then I'm going to go over a little bit because there's different umbrellas within, or I should say SREB is the umbrella and there's different buckets underneath SREB. Two of those being NDC and LDC, so everybody can have an idea of what those are, kind of where we are, how we got involved in all of this wonderful fun stuff and where we're going. Going over the rubric, and Pam's probably going to talk a little bit more about that, the powerful literacy practices, how to plan an LDC module, what the big picture is, and then we're going to have and once we go through some of that, and we'll recap with some of that tomorrow morning, because we're going to do like a working lunch, and that way we can get out of here at 2 o'clock, and then we're going to have Mr. Hammett and Ms. Williams are going to show you what it looks like in a classroom. Ms. Williams teaches science, Mr. Hammett history, so you can see exactly what it was that they've done and everything, and they're great resources in our cohort 1. All of our cohort 1 teachers should be great resources for you, especially at your school. And then the idea is to plan the 4 modules that you'll need to do for this year. Cohort 2 will need to do an additional 4 modules, so that we're not getting caught behind the 8 ball. Now, you'll probably be thinking along the lines of like, okay, how are we going to do this in like 3 days when they met, throughout the school year? Well, if you boil it down to the amount of time that we spend, you'll kind of see how that's going to happen. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. There's also snacks in the bookkeeper's office and Finley's office if you wanted to purchase some or whatever. And then again, I think everybody got the email as far as like the working lunch and everything. If not, we can go ahead and y'all can go ahead and go get stuff when we break for lunch. Maybe we'll take a little bit longer and then we'll go from there. Because like I said, it will be a little bit of information overload. Okay, so SREB, just to talk a little bit about what SREB is, they were formed in 1948. It was the first regional interstate compact for education with Southern governors and legislators that recognized the link between education and economic vitality. To this day, the organization maintains its focus on critical issues that hold a promise of improving quality of life by advancing public education. And what it does is it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization headquartered in Atlanta, and they have 16 member states. Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. The work is funded by members' appropriations as well as by contracts and grants from foundations and from local and state federal agencies. One of the largest contributors to this is the Gates Foundation. So if you happen to go on the SREB website and you're looking at different things or what the Gates Foundation funds, they have been a huge contributor to funding SREB. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to take up there. So, and they do stuff from as early on as early education all the way through doctoral studies. Big push in K-12 public education. So that's a little bit about SREB. Within SREB, you have MDC, which is the Mathematics Design Collaborative, and LDC, which is the Literacy Design Collaborative. Now, before we go any further, I know some of you are probably thinking, oh God, here we go, another initiative. How many times have we seen this in education? This is my 16th or 17th year teaching, and it seems like from when I started, I had some gaps in there, and then went back to education, it was like every time someone else was trying to do something else, and we were trying to, kind of put square pegs in a circle, and it's like, okay, how long is this one gonna last? Just so that you know, what we're gonna be talking about is nothing more than strategic teaching, okay? And many of the things that we talk about already, you already do, okay? It's just another way of doing it and trying to pull stuff together to make sure that we're hitting all of the different learning styles of students. Boil it down in a nutshell, okay? What MDC is, and they definitely, and having, Pam and I have had the benefit of going to both the literacy, the LDC, and the MDC training, and you can really see how the two mesh together. So it's not like we're islands in and of itself. And the thing that's funny about it all is that I am not a math person by any means. I get the literacy stuff, I get like how we should be having these conversations in the discourse and math and everything. So Nicole Evatt and I worked together on one of the MDC modules, and I was in her room quite a bit this year, seeing what she was doing, how she was doing it, how she was implementing it. And she and I put together a proposal. We're actually going to SREB's national conference in July. We got selected to present about having those conversations in that discourse and what it should look like in a mathematics classroom. So even though I'm not a math person, I get what it looks like, and I've actually learned a lot about math having been able to go to this training and what it should look like in a mathematics classroom. And I don't know if you want to add to any of that, Pam.
It's like the same things that we're doing in the LDC, they're also doing those same things in the MDC. They are implementing reading, writing, and speaking in their math courses. It's called Math Talk. And it is just so neat to see that when you start hearing and seeing students have conversation about math. It's basically, this MDC and LDC, just like Ms. Myers said, it's just good teaching. It's strategic teaching, the way we should be teaching. It's really not something new.
So what MDC is, it provides teachers with not just a math curriculum, but with teaching tools called formative assessment lessons. So if you hear your counterparts in math talking about vowels, that's what it is. And it's to help them and their students understand college and career readiness math standards that they've been taught. Teachers learn to adapt to assignments and embed the standards and engage students so that they understand not only the hows of math, but the whys. And I have to tell you, the training that I went to last summer with this, and then even going through with teachers, and math teachers especially, I think have really had this shift in their teaching, because one of the things that MDC does is that you are to promote and allow those students to have that productive struggle. It's no more getting up and teaching students, okay, you need to, here's a formula, here's how we do it, here's how we plug it in, go for it. It's giving students a set of problems and letting them figure it out and have that productive struggle. So when the teacher's walking around the room, and there's this math teacher at Douglas, I mean, we have great teachers too, but one of the things that I saw her doing, I cannot remember her name.
Miss Amber.
Amber. She kept referring the students, Pam had filmed it, and she kept referring the student back to what the daily outcome was supposed to be, and watching them struggle through it to come up with the answers and to be able to use that math vocabulary that they should be using. Instead of like plugins, it's substitution, right? So it was really great to see the kids going back and using that mathematic vocabulary, that academic vocabulary, and having them think and work through individually as well as in collaboration.
It's like when the student would call you over, the teacher over, and say, look at my work, is this correct? The teacher is not allowed to say yes or no. She asks a question. In other words, the student has to be able to think through and convince the teacher why they think their problem is correct. I mean, so it's just a different way of teaching. You're asking questions to the students constantly. The students are verifying it.
the vowels and the mathematic design is very scripted, okay? Very, very scripted. They have to follow the script. It's got all of these different things that are involved in it. So unlike what we do with LDC, they've got a script that they have to follow. And why some people may say, oh, that's really easy. That's much easier than what we're having to do. I agree on one hand, but on the same hand, when you see it implemented, there were teachers that were like working in groups and trying to work through this process that were getting very frustrated in the training, wanting to walk away. And as a kid, if I was in that math class, I would be like, oh my God, you suck as a teacher. You're supposed to be teaching me and helping me through this. Because that's what we've always, that's the learning that we've always had. But what they're trying to do is say, okay, no, you need to think through this. You have the resources. We've just done this. You need to be able to sit there and walk through it and figure it out. I am not going to hold your hand and spoon feed it to you. You've got a partner over here. Ask your partner. Well, that partner may be wrong too. Okay, we'll sit there and figure it out. And it was really cool to see in the classrooms how the kids went about figuring this stuff out. And I'm not talking about your AP kids. I'm not talking about your advanced kids. Miss Sanderson implemented it here, and it was with our students that were in Algebraic Connections. And she was doing it with those kids. You had some kids that were, they could do the work. Some kids that were on grade level. A lot of kids were not. She also had a lot of kids in there that were special ed. Some had 504 plans. And it was really awesome to see the way she had paired them up and to see them walking and talking through this process. And it got easier, and I don't mean the math got easier for them, but once they started doing this stuff, it got easier for them to work with one another instead of saying, okay, Miss Anderson, I'm not getting this. You need to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. Which that's what was going on in the beginning, like kids getting frustrated and wanting to walk away. But at the end, though, they were starting to engage. They were starting to have fun. Stuff that I got first, and it was really cool to see them figure out, okay, no, that's wrong. That doesn't work together. It's got to be this one. And to see that, and having them write mathematical formulas, I was like, okay, I would not be able to have done this. I wish I had a teacher that was doing this with me in math, because I don't think that way.
I want to just talk just for a minute, if you don't mind, about some experiences I had at Douglas. The very first time I went into Miss Amburn's room, and they were in the groups and they were doing their FAL, it was like you could tell the students were not used to working together, talking to each other. It seems like middle school just went with it. It seems like the middle school, when I went there, those students are more used to working in groups, but the high school was not. And they wanted to rely on the teacher. It was like, well, I don't have to do anything because the teacher's not with me, or not told me what to do. You have your instructions, you have your cards, y'all go to work. Well, then the first time, it was like just figuring out how to do everything. And that, no, the teacher's not going to help me. Realizing, she's just going to come over here and ask another question. Maybe that question will guide me. Well, then the second time they did the FALs, we walked out and kids were like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I have never thought so much in my life. And to me, that was music to my ears. Is to hear kids say, I am so tired. I have never had to think this much before. Is that not what you want to hear? Because what do kids not know how to do? Think. They are so used to us spoon feeding them, they don't know how to think for themselves. So I was like, yes, this really works. If you're saying, you've been in here it was a block day, an hour and a half, and you are physically and mentally exhausted from thinking, then we've done our job. And then the next time when I went in, it was the third FAL, and the kids were like, yay, yes, today's game day. That's how their attitude had changed. It's like doing these FALs where you have to think and work. They were calling it game day now. So to me, it was just awesome. I was so excited. And the kids, they really grew. Now, we may not see it in our scores yet so much, but we will. It takes, 3 years really for you to start really seeing growth in your scores. We saw some growth at Douglas this year, but not like you would, expect to go out. We probably doubled in our math score. But anyway, it was so thrilling to hear those children speak like that. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So where does that put us? Okay, so you got math over there doing the MDC, and then you've got everybody else doing the LDC, the literacy, okay? So that includes your career prep, all of your electives, your math, your history, your science, your English, and anybody else I may have just left out. All of us are supposed to be doing the LDC. One thing though with the LDC is that it is not scripted. We have to create our own plans that fit into this module and this task with these mini tasks. And it may seem overwhelming today. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, this is a tested instructional framework, and like I said, it's strategic teaching. This is stuff that you all are probably already doing.
Well, one of the middle school teachers referred to it as Quirl, which is also strategic teaching. I don't know if high school people know what Quirl is.
And it gates teachers in the planning and literacy-based assignments that engage students in deeper learning to advance content and literacy achievement. Now, when these standards, I don't want to say they changed, but when they were updated 5 or 6 years ago, they included literacy standards in Alabama. They included literacy standards for all content areas. So one of the things that we're going to be focusing on, and it'll probably be more tomorrow than today, is really taking those literacy standards and looking at those literacy standards and what they mean and what we need to be doing with them in our content. So it's a way of incorporating those rigorous literacy standards into the middle grades and high school content area assignments, provides a system for creating assignments using reading, writing, and thinking skills and strategies to advance students' academic achievement and their abilities to read, comprehend, analyze grade level text and express their understanding orally and in writing. Okay, grade level is key here, all right? Because we know that a lot of our students come in and they're not even on grade level, okay? What is it that we need to do to get them there, and how are we gonna do it? Now, if you've been to or plan to attend, has anybody been to LTF training? Anybody going to E3 training? What A+ College Ready is calling it now. Okay, that is still the strategic teaching. It is very scripted in your content area. However, you can still take, it's strategic teaching. You can take that stuff and put it in with these LDC template frameworks, whatever you want to call it, and that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so if you've been to that training, you can still utilize those types of things for this training. We're not asking you to change up everything you're doing. You may have to add a little bit to it, maybe change the format, restructure a little bit, but it's still, again, within your content and using those strategies. Okay, so Marshall County, where we are and where we are going. So I don't know exactly how things have been communicated to everybody as far as how did we get into this, how were you selected to be part of this wonderful training that we're having over the next 3 days. But last spring, there was a grant opportunity for college college and high school readiness courses that again are under that bucket, that umbrella of SREB. DAR was the only school at that point in time that had filled out for the grant, and we were approved. And what that means for, I'm not I cannot remember right now what exactly that means for the high school readiness portion, but those kids that are in those college readiness courses are your English and math, have not benchmarked on the ACT. Okay, they may have the grades and everything, but they haven't scored that 18 in English and that, was it 22 in math? I can't even think. 22 in math, okay, to go into college level math classes and English classes. And we know the problem with that. If they have not benchmarked on the ACT, regardless of what their grades are, they're going to be put in remedial college courses. Which means if they get the Pell Grant, if they've got scholarships, if they have student loans, they cannot use that money for remedial courses, okay? So there's kind of a discrepancy when you look at student grades and you look at those benchmarks and say, okay, if you've got a 3.5 average, why are you not benchmarking in your English and math? And if they're not benchmarking in English and math, the likelihood that they're not benchmarking in science, which is a 23, and reading, which is also a 22, is probably pretty likely. So that was one of the reasons why it was attractive to us to get these college readiness courses on board. And I will tell you that there was a lot of schools that I didn't get to go to the Gardendale training because I was in Salt Lake last year. But there was a lot of confusion when our teachers went to the college readiness and the high school readiness training down there in Gardendale, as well as administrators, because these things had to be worked out with the State Department. Even though SREB is in all of these states, these 16 states, they didn't have any kind of agreements with the community colleges. And this was a pilot program that we were starting. And it's not a matter of just enrolling in an MDC class or a college readiness math class or a college readiness English class. You have to score at least an 80% on the content in those classes in order to be able to go into like a 101 or a Math 100, because Math 100 is the level that they start at for college credit. So what happened was in the spring, after we got accepted into the grant, and we only had high school readiness for ELA, other schools in the district were brought on board because we ended up partnering with SREB for this LDC and MDC work. Okay, so we have LDC and MDC over here, and then we have the college readiness and the high school readiness courses. Two different things. The college readiness and the high school readiness courses are still have the LDC and MDC strategies and everything in them, but they too are very scripted, and you have to complete so many modules in the math as well as in the English readiness course, college readiness course, in order to be able to go to those college level courses. So that's how that started, and then they brought in, I believe, math readiness, college readiness is the only thing that's on the other campuses. Now, whether Marshall County plans on expanding that for English readiness courses at Brindley, Douglas, and Asbury, that I don't know. But that's how we got started with all of this. The other thing is, we did not know, and we were the only ones that had the ELA in the middle school, the high school readiness. We didn't have the math readiness. I'm not sure if we're going to be bringing that on and if ELA is going to be at the other campuses as well. Because if you know anything about our data in Marshall County, our math scores are absolutely horrible across the board. So I think that's why math was seen as the push. And I don't think it's teachers or anything. I just think it's, the kids and the way they think and that kind of stuff, especially since ACT now has such high stakes on things. So that's why there was this push to go with math. So now that we've expanded the grant, and what happened was we were all still trying to, we were assigned to be local trainers. Ashley McCullough and Marcia Mitchell were also assigned to be local trainers at their schools. So we were getting trained in both literacy and math, LDC and MDC. We're trying to figure out exactly how all of this is going to work and what's going to happen. And then we were having the trainings with the LDC and the MDC, but we didn't have this big picture of, okay, you already planned, during the summer, at the beginning of the year, what you're going to be doing. Now I have to try to figure out how I'm going to take these modules that I've had to create and put them in what I've already planned to teach. And then I've got to teach it, I've got to bring student work, we're doing all this, and we were pulled out of the classroom. How many times, Ms. Williams, were you pulled out of the classroom for this stuff last year? A million, okay? We also had a lot of documentation with principal letters and observations, debriefings, and the debriefings and stuff are gonna happen, but we thought about, like, towards the end of the year, it would have been really good if we had been, it's almost like they needed to start this a year ahead of time so that we could have been more familiar with what it was gonna happen, so that we could explain to everybody what we were gonna be doing and how it was all gonna work, and then teachers would be able to better plan and implement. So that's why we're here today, is to give you a short version, because the cohort 1 teachers are supposed to be the support for the cohort 2. They will still have to meet 4 times this year with our trainer from SREB, and you all know the cohort 2 teachers will not be pulled out of class for that. That's another reason why we're doing this today. So on those half days, I believe that's where we're gonna have some of the PD training. I'm not sure about the full days in the calendar where we have those Wednesdays that we have the half days off. I'm not sure about the full days of PD training, and I know people have flex days and stuff that they're accumulating, so I'm not really sure exactly how all that's gonna work. So by this year, we were supposed to have at least 40% of our teachers trained district-wide, and by cohort 3, year 3, 80 to 100% of our teachers trained, and that 80% is allowing for turnover, retirement, things like that, where we may not have that full faculty, but we'll still be bringing people on to do the training. So today and tomorrow, now you're gonna say, well, how are you doing this in 3 days? Why, if it took 6 days for the other teachers, why? One of the things is we're cutting to the chase. What is it that you need to know, okay, about this LDC framework? The other thing is you all are very capable, competent individuals, and even though there's collaboration and group work and things like that, we talk about it, and we're not going to have you all getting into groups and doing some of the different types of things around the room. We wanted to be able to show you what it looks like with our cohort 1 teachers, what is the information you need to know, and get you in and start planning for the next year and be as much of a resource as possible. Now, it would be great if over the next 2 days you get all 4 of your modules created, planned, and ready to go. Is that realistic? Probably not. But we wanted to be able to give you as much information as possible and ability to plan so that you knew what to do and how you were going to be doing that over the course of the year. Does that make sense? All right. At this point, we're going to talk about the powerful literacy rubric, and then Pam's going to go over that. That's the multicolored paper and how it functions within what we're doing for LDC, and then we'll take a little bit of a break and we'll go from there.
If everyone will pull out the rubric. This is the rubric that you should go by when you're planning your lessons. Okay, if you'll just kind of glance over it, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, the 4 is where you would love to be. So let's look at the very first one. Planning literacy-based assignments. To what extent does the literacy-based assignment, which includes an authentic written product, reflect evidence from reading complex texts that are challenging and appropriate to the course content? So that's where you evaluate your module or lesson that you have created. That's where you're saying, you're assessing your end product is a writing product. And in that writing, is there evidence from the reading? Is that there? Where would you fall? Where would your lesson fall? Would it be a 1, 2, 3, or a 4? And like when you debrief, say with Carrie Ann or me or the principal, this is how they score you. And I think some principals are going to this rubric when they do your evaluations. Also, look right under it where it says the assignment is designed to engage students in the reading of complex text, leading to a clear, authentic writing product that allows for multiple responses supported by evidence. Student engagement, that's the next big piece, is student engagement. Now take just a minute, and I want you to just go through and read from the 1 to the 4. And just think your lessons from last year, where would they fall? I would say that for most of us, if you were not in LDC, we would probably be over here in the 1. So we want to work our way to where we score on the 4s. Okay, let's go down to planning the lesson. Lesson sequence. LDC is a backwards plan. It is you start with your assessment and you plan backwards. How will I get my students to be able to do this complex assessment? And read the material, grade level material, and put evidence in this writing piece. How will I get them there? So you plan backwards. This is your sequence. To what extent the lesson sequence supports or scaffolds the learning of literacy and content standards with explicit instruction that leads students through every part of the learning process. So see, no matter what, it includes content standards and literacy standards. You're covering both standards in your content. The next one is your learning targets. Sometimes we use that word with objective, your objective. This is you have your course of study objectives. This is the target that you are focusing on for that lesson. The skill that you're focusing on for that lesson. That's your learning target. To what extent have clear and measurable objectives and learning targets been communicated to the student? It should be visible in the classroom, always. And the student should understand it. It should be written so that the students can understand it. And the students should be able to tell you about it and know what's expected to reach that learning target. Like in the math class that we were talking about, that she was talking about, that we videoed, the student, when the teacher asked a question and the student had to explain, they referred back to the learning target on the board in their explanation. So that lets you know they really understood what they were supposed to be doing in their explanation if they used the learning target. Okay, and if you'll notice, it has what the teacher should do and what the students should be able to do in this rubric.
And one of the times that Maria, she is our district trainer, when she had come on site and we were going around to the different rooms, and she was observing Miss Weems. Miss Weems was actually doing a virtual lab, and with her 9th grade class, and Maria was asking the students, well, what is it that you're doing? And they were able to tell what they were doing, why they were doing it. They weren't just pointing to the board and looking at the objective. They were able to explain and talk her through what it was that they were learning and why they were doing it and what the purpose of the assignment was. And not necessarily in those words, but you were able to know and understand that they knew that what they were doing had a purpose, and they knew what they were trying to get to. And there was definitely that writing piece at the end. So that's the thing. And I want to just reiterate that this rubric, and we're going through accreditation this year as well. I think everybody knows that. But the rubric, and it follows a coaching model, okay? So that's one of the things where it was like hard to separate, and I think people always felt like when I was going in as the assistant principal, but I was really going in to say, okay, let's see what it is that you're doing. I would engage, like the one time I had gone in with Miss Weems, I was playing Kahoot with her kids, and seeing how that stuff actually worked and what she was doing and stuff, and I was engaged in the lesson. Same thing with Miss Sanderson with some of the math stuff. I was getting frustrated. The poor girls that were working with me trying to figure out that they were like, okay, you really don't need to move on this class, you know, so it was really fun. And then like, you know, and I hope that teachers feel that way, that, you know, we are all here to work together. Yes, I am an assistant principal and I have certain duties and responsibilities, but this is not to be used as an evaluative tool. I got to work with Ms. Brown a lot closer this year because of the LDC and everything. We were talking about, you know, some of the ELA stuff that she was doing, and I was like, well, have you done this yet? You know, we were talking about it because that's like my area. And she was like, no. I'm like, well, do you care if I come in? So I actually got to go in and do some stuff in Romeo and Juliet, which I love. And of course, you know, the kids were like, oh my God, what are you doing in here? You know, so that was like really a fun piece for me too, is to actually be engaged in the classroom and teaching, and not just doing with them. And of course, you know, in Miss Weems' class, kids were keeping score, and I was like, and you could see my number flash. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. But it was really a good thing. So you guys are probably, like I said, you're all doing this stuff, but this is just another way to like think about, okay, what I'm doing, and what is it that I can change, tweak about what I'm doing so that it falls within that 4 level and not that 1. And just remember that this is like supposed to be that coaching model. It's not disciplinary. It's not to be like an, oh, I got you kind of thing. It's when you have those debrief sessions, it's like, okay, well, you know, I noticed this. You know, what do you think about this? Or how did you feel that the lesson went? What do you think you could have done differently? Or what would you like to do differently? And I know I was always doing that. You know, I like the fact that when I would have like a 1st period class and a 6th period class, you know, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, because there were always things that after I'd done it once, I would figure out like, oh, I should have done it this way. So maybe my 6th period class, I almost wish we could flip them sometimes, because I felt like my 6th period class would get more of a benefit of certain things. And then of course, you know, the day would go on and I'd forget to tell you, you know, the class in the morning, but it was kind of like that trial run. Sometimes it would be nice to have those later kids would be the trial run and let those early morning kids get it like for the second time that I was doing it. So just to keep those things in mind.
And it is okay if we start in the 1.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're first starting writing LDC modules and getting used to this and putting reading into the content areas and teaching these literacy strategies within science and social studies and career prep, it's okay to be at the 1. Just make sure you're at the 1, and then, you know, as you go on, think, what could I do? What could I have added, or what can I do to move it to a 2? And then maybe move it to a 3, move it to a 4. So like she said, it's not, this is for you to guide yourself at your lessons and your students. I mean, this is the ultimate goal of where we want to be, is at the 4. Now, are we at 4s? No. I mean, I don't think any of us are at a 4. But that's just a goal to strive for. Okay, so it's okay, because we're going to be down here in the 1 and the 2 when we start. So don't let this intimidate you at all. We're going to be in the 1s and the 2s to start with, probably. Next, we have the instruction literacy strategies. To what extent are literacy strategies, reading, writing, speaking, and or listening, integrated into the content-based instruction? To what extent did we use all of those strategies? And then it'll break it down, the lesson, the teacher, the student. So, I mean, you can read these. I don't want to, you know, just sit and read these for you, but it gives you in the rubric what the lesson, the teacher, and the student. So you could sit back, you know, and you should always, it's the students. It's all about student learning. What are the students doing?
One of the things that I would see with, in this area of like lesson planning is a lot of teachers think that when we do a graphic organizer, that that's my literacy piece. I'm having them read and then having them complete a graphic organizer is that writing component. And that's getting them to the writing component. That to me would be in your level 1, possibly even a level 2, because they have to extract stuff in order to fill out that graphic organizer, like a KWL chart or a Venn diagram. But what it doesn't do is get the student to put that stuff that they've gathered in that graphic organizer, formulating their own thoughts and understanding about what happened. When I was in Florida, we used to have constructive response, kind of like what we saw with Aspire in our statewide assessment. And students were allowed to write, in the booklets, to do their drafts, where we tell them all that, and then they had to write their constructive response, and it could only fit within the box or it wouldn't get scored. And so there was this huge push with the strategic teaching and getting them to do these different things and using these graphic organizers, and we could not understand why some of our high-level students were scoring so low on these constructive responses. And what had happened and what we found out is that in those boxes, students were putting their KWL charts. They were putting in their Venn diagrams because teachers were not taking it to that next step and saying, okay, this is a tool for you to extract that information, but then you have to finish in responding to that prompt and write that piece out. And that's where, even if you do an exit slip and you have them doing like the 3 bullet points or whatever, they still need to take it to that next level in order for it to be that writing piece, to be considered that full literacy experience, so that students are engaging in the material. And I have to tell you, that has like been even AP when I saw what I was having to score this past week. It was again, students understanding and engaging with the material to be able to write a really great piece. And so I think that, we're not the only ones that are struggling with it. It's all over the country and internationally as well, is getting students to be able to think and to put their thoughts together based on the stuff that they're reading. So we need to make sure we take it to that next step. It's great to extract the information, but we've got to take it to the next step.
That would be, the graphic organizer would be like a mini task. It would not be your end product. The end product should be a paper that they've written, or at least a paragraph. Explaining in their own words. And that's what the graphic organizer is, just helping them comprehend what they're reading and keep up with. It's kind of like note-taking. Your graphic organizers is like taking notes for you to study by. It's to organize your thoughts. Okay. The very last page, student discourse. To what extent does the classroom environment promote student discourse that supports ownership of learning and a deeper understanding of important concepts? This whole LDC is putting students owning their own learning, owning their own learning. Let's look at our goal, which is to be at the 4. The teacher facilitates and monitors students' discussion to gain deeper knowledge of disciplinary text and the development of an authentic written product. The students generate higher order questions as part of collaborative learning process leading toward completion of the assignments. And student discourse is the students talking. When you're having a discussion, who should do most of the talking? The students. And I think the students are so used to the teacher doing all the talking, set and get. Well, we're going away from that to where now the students should be doing most of the talking. The teacher is more of the facilitator of the discussion to keep it going.
This goldenrod sheet that you have, that I passed out, and it's also in that Google folder that you'll get, this is really where this comes in this row, the rubric, is depth of knowledge, level 1, and then you have level 4. We really want to see students in that 2, 3, and ultimately that 4 range. okay? So getting students to facilitate, to generate that higher order question, they're gonna be in that 2-3 category. And I may show tomorrow in the morning that little bird thing. Everybody that was in the cohort 1 has seen it. I know our teachers have seen it because I did it that one time. It was kind of funny. And I thought it really got to the point, so I may show that tomorrow. But how do we get them to do that higher order questioning and then ultimately analysis? And then your kids in your standard classes may say, why do I need to do this? What do I have to do this for? And my response was, even like with writing a research paper, you know what, when you're working at McDonald's and you get burnt from the grease or the fryer or whatever it is and something happens, or you've got a complaint about scheduling, you need to be able to put your ideas and thoughts together. Look at the personnel policies, look at your work rules and regulations, okay? That's that nonfiction text. You need to be able to put that stuff together in a well thought out, rationalized statement, argument, what have you. That's why we're doing this. So when they want that real world example, I try to give it to them. You can't just say, this is dumb, man. This is stupid. I don't get this. That's not going to get you anywhere. You need to be able to put your thoughts together, put it in print, and send it off to whoever it is. Think logically about these. I'm not going to be working at McDonald's. Well, you know what? You're going to be working somewhere, hopefully. So you need to be able to do that.
And then the last category is the assessment. To what extent are assessments used in all aspects of the teaching and learning process? And notice they have formative and summative. Are formative assessments used to guide instruction? What do you do after a formative assessment? You evaluate those assessments to see which students do you need to take further, which students didn't get it, do you need to reteach to or find a different way to present it? That's what the formative assessments. Formative assessments are clearly aligned to identified standards and cognitive demands. The teacher adjusts instruction based on regular checks for understanding that monitor progress. The teacher adjusts instruction based on regular checks for understanding that monitor progress. That's from the formative assessments. Whether it's a daily exit slip or whether you look at their Venn diagrams to see if they could extract the information. Just any writing that you do that day, you're assessing it to see what do I need to do to adjust my instruction. Okay, and the students demonstrate understanding through the application of multiple literacy-based strategies to create a sustained writing product. That's our goal, is for them to have that ultimate writing product at the end. And then of course you have a summative assessment at the end, where you're hoping that that's where you assess did they meet all of their learning targets. And hopefully, if you've done the formative assessments along the way, that your students will be successful then on the summative assessment to have reached the standards in the objectives. So this is just a rubric that we go by to plan the lessons. Any questions? Anything else?
The only thing that I want to point out, and I want you to keep in mind, is that I don't know if any